Hi YouTube, Joe March here. If you're someone like me who studies both religions and mythology, you may have noticed that societal rules are baked in to the stories in both religions and mythology. I'm here to talk about something that I think is also baked into most of them, which is the concept of humanity overcoming nature, or more specifically, society overcoming nature. The most direct example of this that I can think of is in the Enuma Elish, the ancient Babylonian text that talks about Marduk or Marduk versus Tiamat and their struggle. The idea that this god that would become king of the gods and therefore above all of humanity, creating this hierarchy which mankind would follow, defeated this great serpent or dragon and turned it into the earth by cleaving its body into the sky and the seas. But what are we really talking about here? Tiamat in the story is said to represent chaos and primordialism, as she's from the abyss. And we're not necessarily talking about the wondrous abyss of space, as we might think of in a modern time, but more the abyss of the sea. She represents that which is natural, the chaotic forces of nature. And to us who live in a very modern world now, it may not seem like nature is just a continuously chaotic force, coming and going as it will, bringing chaos and disaster, but to someone who lived in the days before primarily established societies, that was definitely the way nature was viewed. So Tiamat represents nature as a whole, and Marduk or Marduk represents the king in charge of the city or the society of Babylonia or Sumeria or wherever you are, coming in and taking control of nature, carving it out into something that the people can live upon and prosper upon, instead of it being a chaotic force that they can't control. Therefore, it is a story of society overcoming nature. Now, you don't have to get to the point where we have big cities in order for this to show up. You see it in shamanism as well, with something as simple as a tribe. The tribe, it represents a type of lifestyle which is considered its society. But the shaman sometimes will go travel to the spirit world in order to find answers that are obscured from him while living in that society. And what that meant in the old days, as my good friend Milton Knowles pointed out to me, was that the shaman was going out into nature, away from the tribe, away from humanity and human things, to try to find answers outside. You see direct examples of this in the Bible as well, with mankind being given dominion over the animals and the land. It's basically God giving permission to the kings of old to be in charge of peoples and places, to be in charge of the animals, to change the land and to make it something that can produce crops and goods, and saying that that is the way things should be, that that is a good way of life. Now, for people in the old days, this makes sense. You had a chaotic way of life in which death came naturally and easy, and then you have a society in which there are rules and ways you have to behave, but in exchange, survival is much better. Nowadays, we may question if some of this has gone too far, but that's outside of the context of what we're talking about today. Most religious texts are full of behaviors and rules that tell you exactly how to behave in that society. They tell a king or a judge how to rule over that society, how to make decisions about what's right and what's not. They have hierarchies, they have placements of people, things like that. Now, of course, in ancient shamanism, that was not the case, but again, you had a smaller society. You had a tribal leader, you had members of the tribe, and you had the shaman. Then in ancient Greece and in other polytheistic religions where they believed in multiple gods, but then also had large societies, these gods represent how a particular city or town was expected to behave, how the people from that caste or city were expected to behave in the greater society. You see this a lot in Babylonian and in Sumerian culture as well. Their cities and towns each had one representative god that represented that town. This is a way of saying, for you, this is your behaviors in the grander scheme of the entire group of cities, states, etc. You'll see this with a fishing culture over here, a mercantile culture over here. Primarily, soldiers are taking from this city over here, and they each worship different gods that represent the way their behaviors are expected to come across in that particular society. It's all a way of creating an understanding of your role and behavior for the society in which you live. Ancient Greece also shows another example of society overcoming nature in Zeus and his brothers defeating the Titans. The Titans were the old way of life prior to society. The hierarchy of the gods is the example of the societal hierarchy that you are now under in ancient Greece life. So why would all these ancient priest kings have a desire to change the religions from something worshiping, say, nature or things within that, to something worshiping these specific figures, or worshiping this concept of society overcoming nature and society being the way that you can be free? You think that might be able to cause those people to gain greater trust, to gain greater power over people, to influence people to believe in their cause and their purpose? Nowadays, we don't really have to think about what religiously society would mean to us. We don't have to have a set of virtues that matches a society because we're born and raised in the society and we don't really know any other way for most of us. So it seems obvious to us that, oh, this is how a society works. Here's different societies. We can talk about them in a very scientific way, but in the past, reaching the most people through stories, mythology, and religion was the way to inform people and to get them on board with your way of thinking. I hope you enjoyed this video. I want to give a shout out to my Circle of Magi on the Patreon. And until next time, safe travels.